who would become Paul VI. They urged the spread of a publication of Father Paul Gauthier, Les pauvres, Jésus et l'Église, the poor, Jesus, and the church. They circulated this, and periodically, before the council and during the council, they would meet. There was a time, according to historians, that they were around 50 meeting periodically in the Belgian college. Yeah. The Belgians provided a hideaway for this group. And they tried to reflect on the different schema being presented to the Vatican II Council halls from the perspective of the Church of the Poor. They are too numerous. Their speeches and writings are too numerous for me to go to them one by one. But just a quick summary of some of the views that they presented during Vatican II. And you would think that they were speaking now, the 21st century. The group called the Church of the Poor decried, lamented the gap between the church and the poor. And by the poor, they meant at the time the farmers, the industrial workers, no? Especially those two groups. They said there is a gap between the church and the poor. And what was their analysis? The gap, they said, was due to the church's perceived, no? The perception given by the church is it is always in alliance with capitalism and not in alliance with laborers and farmers. This is an impression, according to them, that the church gives. Another point that they constantly raised, as Church of the Poor, they said, we, the council, should review and reform the lifestyle and the way ecclesiastics hold on to their dignity and honor. I know this is part of history. When I had a student from Sri Lanka, in the Philippines, he would always call me, my Lord, my Lord. I say, no, please, don't call me Lord. I am a simple human being. Don't call me Lord. You are in the Philippines, call me Bishop. I said, I'm sorry. Then I meet him, my Lord, please. Don't call me Lord. There is only one Lord, Jesus Christ. Call me Bishop. But he could not change a whole habit. And then so he called me again. My Lord said, stop. Next time you see me, call me Jesus Christ. I said, oh no, I cannot do that. Then stop calling me Lord. Yeah. The group called the Church of the Poor already at that time was asking Vatican II to review all of this, the honorary titles and the lifestyle of the ecclesiastics. Another thing that they called for, they said, and this is quite radical for that time, they said, let poverty be presented by the council as an essential aspect of the mystery of Christ and of the church. Poverty as an essential aspect of Christ and the mystery of the church. And because of that, they said the council must explore the presence of Christ in the poor in relationship to the presence of Christ in the Eucharist and in the ordained ministers. So, the presence of Christ in the poor in the Eucharist and in the ordained ministers. A recasting of reflection on the church and even the sacramental presence of Jesus in connection to his presence among the poor. Then, on that fateful day, December 6, 1962, Cardinal Giacomo Lercaro, a day after the speech of Giovanni Battista Cardinal Montini, calling for a readjustment of the agenda of Vatican II, the following day, Lercaro, who was considered the convener of the group called the Church of the Poor, gave a speech in the aula and said, the Church of the Poor should be the only theme of Vatican II. All the other aspects, all the other topics should be treated and discussed from the perspective of the Church of the Poor. So already, during Vatican II, this was discussed. And look at some of the rather earth-shaking proposals that were given. Now, we know, according to one historian, after the speech of Cardinal Lercaro, there was tremendous applause. No, but everyone admitted his proposal was too advanced for a whole ecumenical council to adopt. No? But historians also said that this group called the Church of the Poor had an impact on the redirection of the agenda of Vatican II as approved by John the 23rd and implemented by Pope Paul VI for the second session. Some people even give credit to the group of the Church of the Poor, to which Cardinal Montini belonged, for some of the gestures of Paul VI, like the renunciation of the papal tiara. The tiara, no? And is now in the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C., no? With an inscription, remember the poor. When you see this tiara, remember the poor, how the Pope renounced this tiara and now give to the poor. On June the 28th, I will say Mass there in the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. And I will look at the tiara for all of you. Yeah. And the Pope Paul VI, simplified the liturgy, simplified the vestments, and also revised the procedures and the honors of ecclesiastics. And now even Pope Francis is pushing the reform of those things further. Okay. Are you still with me? So we are not the first to invent this Church of the Poor. It was already present. Now the third stop, briefly, because you are already familiar with this, Vatican II. Let me point to two important parts of Vatican II. Lumen Gentium, the dogmatic constitution on the church. In Lumen Gentium number 18, we are told that Christ is present in the poor. And when the church serves the poor, the church is actually serving Christ in the poor. So almost like a mystical view of the poor as the presence of Christ. That has a biblical foundation. When I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. But then, again, being proposed by Vatican II in Lumen Gentium, no, the motivation and the actual action of serving the poor is really seeing Jesus in the poor and serving Him in the poor. When I was a seminarian, I remember Mother Teresa of Calcutta visiting Manila to talk to seminarians. We were in a big auditorium, and you know how seminarians are. Unruly, talking or jumping around, because she came a bit late. And suddenly it was announced, Mother Teresa has arrived. And she got to the stage, this tiny little woman, and there was silence. No seminary rector or dean of discipline could have imposed that silence. Only this holy presence, made holier by her service of Christ in the poor, could have done that. She gave a simple talk and opened the floor to questions. And one question was, Mother, you are also a human being. How could you stand? How could you stomach, the poverty, the stench, of people whom you are picking up from the gutters, You carry them, you feed them. How? How do you manage? And she smiled and she said, but I see Jesus in them. So I'm not worried about how they smell. I don't worry about how they look. I see Jesus. That's Lumen Gentium. Lumen Gentium. And this has a lot to say about Caritas as Church of the Poor. Whom do we see in the poor? And Gaudium et Spes, of course. We know the immortal lines of Gaudium et Spes, number 1, where the church is invited to be in communion with the hopes and joys and sorrows and anxieties of the men and women of our time, and in particular of the poor and the afflicted. So not only seeing Jesus in the poor, but being one, making the sorrows and pains of the poor our own. And so in the whole section of Gaudium et Spes on socio-economic life and the church's response in mission, we see the spirit of communion and solidarity maintained. But the focus is the human person, the human dignity of the poor, created in God's image, the presence of Christ. The poor are not faceless. The poor are not a mass of people. They are human beings. They are persons with dignity. And aside from the human person, the common good, the good of society. It is from this perspective of human dignity and common good that Gaudium et Spes condemns social inequalities and affirms the universal destination of the goods of the earth. The goods of the earth are to be shared by all. No exclusion. Okay. Hi. Hello, okay. And just to check whether you're still alive. Okay. Now we go to the fourth stop. Pope John Paul II. Oh, we will take more than 5 days if we dwell on the body of teaching and all the gestures of Saint John Paul II. Oh, by the way, we started with John the 23rd, who was just canonized, and we mentioned Paul VI, who will be beatified in October at the end of the Synod of Bishops. No? And then, of course, John Paul II, who was just canonized too. But I would like to just dwell on two writings and speeches where he referred to the Church of the Poor. One is in his encyclical Laborem Exercens, number 8. No? So this is an encyclical that focuses on one sector of the poor, the laborers, and following the social teachings that labor, meaning the person of the laborer, is more important than capital, than money, than investment and profit. No? He says this in number 8. There is a need for every new movement of solidarity of the workers and with the workers. This solidarity must be presented whenever it is called for by the growing areas of poverty and even hunger. So he starts with the workers and laborers, but expands to all areas where there is poverty and even hunger. Solidarity. The Church is firmly committed to this cause, for she considers it her mission, her service, a proof of her fidelity to Christ. So this is not just having an activity for Saint John Paul II. This mission and service of solidarity with the poor is a proof of the Church's fidelity to Christ, so that she can truly be the Church of the poor. So for Pope John Paul II, the Church of the Poor is not just a church that does a lot of good for the poor. No. The Church of the Poor is the church that is faithful to Christ. At stake here is not just activities. What is at stake is fidelity to Christ. How easy it could have been if Church of the Poor were left on the level just of activities, no? But